You are meant to trigger people when you're living authentically. It doesn't mean that you're going to be an asshole. It doesn't mean you're a dick where it's just, like, fuck you. But it does mean that, like, if you feel like you're supposed to do something and say something and you're doing it from a perspective of love and you're doing it from a perspective of, like, I want to expand people's perspectives, I want to shine a light on illusion, you are holding up a karmic mirror. And it's, you don't get to choose whether people look at that mirror. And it's like, if you distort yourself in any way, you're holding up a funhouse mirror. They're getting a distorted reflection, right? You're not doing them a service. But when you radiate authentically, when you express authentically, when you make the posts, regardless of how people are going to feel about them, it is going to trigger people. And that's a gift. That really is a gift, because you're not doing it out of hate. You're not doing it where it's like, I'm better than you. You're simply trying to shine a light on illusion. Now, they get to choose whether they're going to look at that trigger. They get to choose whether they're going to look at that reflection. And I pray that everybody does. I pray that everybody does, because what they're going to witness with that reflection is that the trigger isn't them, that they're clinging to a piece, a mask that isn't them, and they don't need to cling to it.
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Taylor, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor to have you on.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here, man. Excited to dive in.
I wanted to call you Cult Daddy.
Yeah, go for it.
You have an awesome Instagram that I follow, and you post all kinds of deep stuff, and I really love it. Have you lost friends old friends from your Instagram, or just posting your post?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we can dive into that, but it's funny because one of the reasons why I called myself Cult Daddy was, one, just because of kind of the things that I like to talk about. I'm just like, all right, some people are going to be like, he's starting a cult. So I'm like, let's just own it. But actually the other reason is because I grew up in a very high control religion. And it was one of those things where the way that I believe and the way that I think now is very, very different than what I was like programmed to believe and think, right? And so my family is still very much so a part of that religion. And it is one of those things where they, look at me and the things I talk about, and they're just like, he's lost his mind. Like, he's crazy, like, what happened to him? And so definitely have lost some people, but it's interesting because and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later in the podcast, but I do believe that this reality is all about experience, and I believe that reality kind of like reflects back to you the energy that you are. And when you change your energy, when you shift, it's going to magnetize and pull things that are meant for you, but it's also really going to repel and reject things that aren't coherent with that, new energy. And so, it's hard sometimes, but like things get burned away and it just creates space for something new. So it's not all bad. It's just like nature, right? A forest fire comes in and it burns things down, and we're like, how horrible, but it's, necessary and prepares, the forest for new growth and new space. And I think a lot of times the same thing happens with us. And so I've definitely experienced a lot of forest fires in my time, but it's been good.
I love that. How do you define a cult?
There was like a really interesting documentary I saw, and they said, like, what's the difference between a cult and a religion? And, they were like, they're like, give it 100 years. If something can last 100 years, it becomes a religion, right? Before that, it's a cult. For me, I would define a cult as anything that people kind of like outsource their power to. So I believe there's many cults in politics. I believe many brands are cults, right? Where people are just like, they will defend a company or a corporation to the death because they like their product, versus like, hearing another human being's opinion. And so for me, that was the other reason why I did the name Cult Daddy, is just trying to wake people up into, stop giving your power away. Stop giving, like, you need to be sovereign. You need to stand on your own, and, be willing to have opinions, be right or wrong, but, you don't need to identify with certain groups so that you can feel safe. And so I think you find it in politics, you find it in religion, you find it in the capitalist world that we live in. I also think that you can find people that, really follow kind of like the cults. There's very well, I would actually love to get your opinion on this. I think you can find people that kind of fall into specific like groupthink when it comes to like race or different things like that, like culture, right? And it's interesting because talking to my partner, who is mixed, but predominantly Latina, right? She comes from, Guatemala, Mayan heritage. And a lot of the struggles that she went through growing up is, it's like, well, she's not white, so she's not included in that group, but she wasn't brown enough. And so there were people that were also rejecting her. And she was just kind of in this middle ground where it's just like, well, who do I identify with, And so I think there's many, many cults everywhere.
Yeah, you're right. In the 12-step program, I think it's cultish as well. I think in a cult, like in the group think setting, you lose your authenticity and you can't express. You become like a heretic, and
Yeah.
you can't question anything, and you got to think straight, straight thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. I'm 1,000% with you there. I have been through 12-step programs as well, and I was just like, "Oh, this is a little bit culty." Yeah.
yeah. I lost a lot of friends because of it, because I started to question stuff. That's why I always talk about the Greek word heretic, which means choice. I get to make my
Wow.
own choices, my own decisions, and follow my own path. And the Greek word for orthodox means straight, straight thinking, usually told by an authority. And yeah, so I
Exactly.
find that interesting.
Exactly. And I mean, you see it everywhere, right? You look at, one thing that's been super interesting to me is reading the various kind of like Gnostic texts around Jesus, his teachings, right? The ones that were considered heretical and not orthodoxy. And it's fascinating because, I mean, there's definitely some that are crazy where you're just like, yeah, this was written by someone who was freaking off their rocker. But then there's others where you're just like, oh, how interesting. There's kind of a common theme with the heretical text where it's kind of like, hey, you are the path, the kingdom's within you. Here's how
Yeah.
you walk this path and find it inside yourself. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't really fit an orthodoxy. It doesn't fit the authority figure's narrative, right? When it's like, hey, you can figure it out for yourself. And so I think being a heretic is a good thing.
Yeah, and you brought up the Gnostics and Professor Elaine Pagels, from Princeton University. She's one of the ones that helped translate the Gnostic Gospels, the Nag Hammadi Library. And
Yeah.
I got to interview her, and I was so like stoked and happy. She even returned the Gospel of Thomas to Egypt because it was given to
Wow.
Carl Jung on his
Yeah, yeah.
80th birthday. Someone took it and gave it to Carl Jung. So
Wow.
yeah, I
That
was
is
so
so cool. Yeah, I think the Gospel of Thomas is one of those texts that is so powerful because it's just like, there's no storyline. It's just like banger after banger after banger. And a couple of those passages in there were really, really powerful for me, just kind of in my expansion and seeking more knowledge. And so that's really cool that you got to interview her.
yeah, and there's very empowering, the Gospel of Thomas. It's all about going within yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I think one of the most I believe it's verse 5 and I'm going to kind of like paraphrase it. It's not word for word, but it was I think probably the most significant verse I had read, and it's just a saying, from Jesus, and it's like, and Jesus said, look, I believe it's like, look with awareness at that which is in your sight, and everything will be plain to you, for there's nothing hidden that will not become manifest. And it was that scripture. I was like meditating on it, and it really hit me where I was like, wow, my life, my experience of life. Like, I talk about it so much in my content where it's like, hey, reality is a reflection of you. Your experience is a reflection. And if you look at it with awareness, you're going to start seeing your shadows and these different things, that are manifesting. Because I think a lot of times people talk about, shadow work is like a big thing, right, in these spiritual communities. And sometimes people talk about it as if it's just this simple thing where we just sit down, we call the shadow in, and the shadow's like, hey, I'm the shadow, like whatever. And it's like, no, most shadow is completely invisible to us. Like we don't even know where to begin. But the thing is, it's still a part of your energy. And so it's manifesting outside of you, which is why, it's like if you see everything as a reflection. And it was really cool because I can share like a practical example for people of an experience I had. So my my kind of like spiritual awakening, pulling away of these masks, performances that I was doing, tapping into the divinity that exists within me. That led me down a path of seeing where I would collapse, where I would suppress my voice, where I was a people pleaser, all these different things, right? These kind of like inherited traits, systems, programmings, so that I could feel safe. And reality would consistently give me opportunities to expand past it. One of the largest expansions that I think is, really tough for people, especially if you came from a similar background that I came from. I got married when I was 19, and my ex-wife was 18. That was kind of like the thing that you do. Her and I, we were each other's first real boyfriend and girlfriend. We grew up in a religion where it's like you don't do anything before marriage. And so it's like we were engaged and married within 6 months, right? Like super quick. And she still is one of my best friends. But as we were married to each other, it was kind of one of those things where we were just like, we don't vibe the way that we thought we did. And we're like, but we made our decision. And so now we got to, work on it. And now we got to, stick with it. And we did that for 10 years. We had a bunch of ups and downs, had beautiful children. And, as I went throughout my process, it was one of those things where I was like, you know what? It's like, I really feel like, because as I began opening up, as I began expressing more, she would tell me where she's just like, I don't like this version of you. And I'm like, it would hurt me so bad because I'm like, this isn't a version of me. I'm like, this is me, like this is the real me. And we got to this point where truly, like, it was the best our marriage had ever been. It was, our communication was incredible. And both of us were just like, I don't think we're meant to be together. Like, I think, part of like our experience that we're meant to have is to learn how to like break something, but hold it in love. Right.
Mm.
And so we consciously, I guess, conscious to couple is like the word for it. We're just like, it's time to like co-parent. And it just sent massive ripples throughout our family because everyone is like, you guys were the ones that we thought had the best marriage. Like, you never fight, you never do anything. Like, how are you getting divorced? And we would just tell them, like, we just know we're not supposed to be together. Like, we feel the more that I started expressing authentically and the more she did as well, like you could physically feel where it was just like, ooh, there's not a lot of coherence here. Like, it's like, we're both expressing authentically. And the only way that, we feel like we're going to feel that peace or happiness or whatever is if the other person, changes, which is not okay. Right. It's like, you shouldn't change for me and I'm not going to change for you. Not to say that like, being a dick or an asshole. I'm saying that like, we're living in love, but it's like our expression, it just didn't fit. And so, that was like a very hard thing for me. That was some of the deepest programming that I had inside was like, this isn't what a good man does. And, there were many nights where I would just cry because I was like, how can my life path or how can the answer be to break this relationship? I'm like, this impacts my children. Like, why can't the answer just be like, work on it, learn to love each other, like keep the family together. And so anyways, I decided, it's like I knew in my heart, anytime I would tap into that stillness and I would go inwards, like the purity of that signal that just said, hey, like you need to leave. And now I understand that was like an ancestral thing, right? Of people that kind of had stayed in areas that they weren't meant to be. And, it's kind of like, okay, I need to come and break this cycle and say, when you know truth, you know truth. After that, it was a pretty big shift, right? That was like a big, I call them like energy retrievals. That was something where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to collapse anymore. And I saw that in many, many areas of my life where things that, previously I maybe would have like been a little bit quiet about or suppressed my feelings. I was just like, no, I'm just going to express. Because of that new energy I was embodying, right? Nothing hidden will not become manifest. There's like a magnetism to energy. And so literally things in my reality started shifting. And one of the big shifts was now, because relationships, right? Relationships are going to mirror to you, your energy. So your partners are some of your most divine teachers because they're going to show you where you collapse, where you fragment, where you suppress yourself for love. It's why a narcissist often attracts, a people pleaser. It's because the people pleaser is being seen where they'll collapse themselves out of this transactional love. A narcissist is being shown the way that they will overpower and hurt someone to get whatever they need. Now, whether they are willing to look at that with awareness, most don't, but that's what's being, reflected. And so as I embodied a new energy, my now partner, Christine, came into my life. And I had some pretty insane experiences leading up to it where I was just like, whoa, this isn't real. Like mystical, almost like psychedelic experiences. We were completely in different parts of the world. But like the way that we were brought together, we were just like, whoa, this is crazy. Like the first time I saw one of her reels, I was like, I know this person. Like, I was like, I know her. I'm like, this is crazy. Where do I know you from? And so it was after I decided, to get divorced, she came into my life. And it was one of those things where it's like, I really felt like I needed to go see her. But again, inside, I was just like, well, do I need more time? Is this the right thing to do? All these different questions. This is a very long story. I'm like, hey, let me tell you how to see a reflection. And then I'm like, let me give you every detail. Um, it's my ADHD for sure. But it was funny because leading up to going to see her in Bali, I met with one friend, and me and that friend, they were like, hey, you need to get back together with your wife. The answer is not for you to, like you and your wife decided to split and now, you found someone else and you're going to go. They're like, this is a midlife crisis. You're having a breakdown. Like you need to go and get your wife, go get your kids and be like, hey, you know what? Let's make this work. Right. And so we talked for like an hour, but it didn't sit right. Like I understood what he was saying, but I was like, I don't know. So I talked to another friend and me and that friend, we went through both sides of the argument of, should I go? Should I stay? We looked at it from every philosophical angle. We would talk about things, from this angle of, like I would say things where it's like deep down inside, I know that like I love my ex-wife, but I don't like love my ex-wife like that, And I'm like, so it's not fair for her to be with me. It's like, why would I would never want her to be with me if that's how I feel. And I know that's how she feels with me because we've talked. And so that's not good, And I'm like, so I need to do that. But then we would take the other side of the angle where it's like, well, wouldn't a narcissistic abuser be like, hey, I'm doing this for their benefit, like here's, creating this story, right? Where it's like, I'm taking this higher path. And so we discussed it from every single angle for 2 hours. And I hung up the phone and I was just like, I have no clarity. I'm like, both sides of those sound good. And I'm like, which one is it? And I'm like, am I choosing truth or am I a narcissistic abuser? Like, And so I'm like, wow, what is it? Then I met with another person and they were like, hey, let's sit down and let's pull some tarot cards. Let's use like a little divining thing, spindle. And while they were doing it, I could just tell that they were like putting their own opinions into it. Like they already had their preconceived notions and I could feel it. Right. And they're like, ooh, spirit is saying this, spirit is saying this. And I'm like, I don't think spirit's saying that. I think that's your opinion, but you're like, here's what spirit is saying, right? And so there were a few other circumstances similar to that where I was just like, this is so annoying. And I'm like, this is so stupid. And as I was driving home, that scripture came to my mind. And I was like, wait a second, reality is a reflection of me. And I'm like, oh my God, my one friend is reflecting to me this, like, well, maybe I should just go back. Maybe we should just make it work. Like, that's the easy road. That's the safe road. And like, that's what a good man does, right? The other friend was reflecting this battle that I had inside that where I was truly like, is this the right path? And it's like, or am I just like making a quick decision, completely destroying a family, just being like, hey, we're all done. Let's move on. And the third friend was reflecting back to me how I would use spirituality to bypass my own decision making, being like, hey, God, give me the answer. Tell me what to do, right? Outsourcing my divine right to choice and knowledge and all of these things. And as I sat with it, it was just like, wow, this whole time I've been wanting to be told, like, what is the decision? What is the path? And the reason why I wanted that was because then I can bypass my own responsibility to it. Then I can be like, well, God told me, or then I can be like, here's what this is, right? And it's like you pull away because the thing is, I know that that was the right decision. Like I have seen my relationship with Christine and like the difference of being in a relationship where you feel constrained versus a relationship where your partner just reflects your divinity and it's so expansive. Like it has been a completely new experience to me. And so I know that I made the right decision. But what that experience taught me too was sometimes the wrong decision is going to have consequences. Like there always is going to be, or the right decision will have collateral damage. And it's not about how do we avoid it. It's not about how do you make sure nothing bad happens. It's about how do we create a space and hold it in love so that
Mm.
every party that is involved feels taken care of, feels loved, feels nurtured. You can't bypass the pain. And it's crazy because my ex-wife, one of the things that I was going through this spiritual awakening that was completely different to her. Once we got divorced, it really cracked her open, which sent her to the same spiritual awakening, and we have conversations all the time now where she's like, oh my gosh, she's like, everything you talked about, I thought you were insane. And she's like, but now I understand it. And she's like, there was one night where I was praying and meditating, and I was just like, if I would have just trusted him and been more encouraging, would we still be together? And she was like, I just heard it so clearly where it's like, no, you're not meant to be together. Everything happened the way that it was supposed to. Like,
Mm.
you're both on your paths. And so, all of that was like such a cool experience and such a beautiful reflection where I was able to like witness myself, witness where I would outsource my power, witness where I wanted decisions to be made for me. And so, it's a long example, but I just say it because I think sometimes people, when they hear reality is a reflection, it's just like, well, what the fuck does that mean? But then when you can hear someone's experience, right, then it's just like, oh, okay. So when I'm driving to work and I get so triggered because I'm in traffic, like, what is the source of that trigger? What is it showing me? What is that revealing to me about myself and my energy, right? And
Mm.
so my question to you is, I would love to hear kind of like your experiences. I know a little bit just from talking with Christine, but like you're such an open-minded dude. Like, have you always been that way, or did you come from a very specific, background, and like what led to that shift?
I think I grew up in the same background as Christine's dad.
Okay.
From when I got to know her, a lot of gangs. My both my parents were gang members, and you know, as I look back, I was as a little boy, I'm identified with the spacesuit, right? The culture, you know how the Buddha says, with our thoughts, we create the world? But when I went through the 12 steps, especially the fourth step, I got to see how the world created my thoughts, all the
Wow.
mental
Yeah.
conditioning,
Yep.
people around me, their belief systems that I inherited. That wasn't mine. And then when I'm a little boy and I'm watching TV in Hollywood, the only time I seen is someone that looked like me, because I was so identified with my my culture and my spacesuit,
Totally.
is guys that were robbing people, raping people. They were illiterate. They were gang members. They were selling drugs, and then of course the white guys always changing, saving the world. But I'm the guy causing chaos in the world, and so
Yeah,
I actually that was programming. And I'm not
absolutely.
saying that as a being a victim, but it's trying to understand how I was programmed a certain way, along with trauma, not knowing how to communicate and express my pain and experiences, and yeah, didn't have the proper coping skills. So I started to see, yeah, you're right. As I didn't know, as a man thinketh in his mind, so was he. So if I have a lot of trauma, I'm living in this ignorant state, and I'm starting to gangbang and experiencing friends get murdered, like, you know, that of course that's gonna affect me. My personality creates my personal reality, right? Like
Yeah.
Joe Dispenza often says. So yeah, I got to see how that stuff affected me. But when I had my awakening, I had a what I like to call a nirvana type, a glimpse or nirvana type awakening where the whole identity of I was blown out for a brief moment. Then nirvana means to extinguish. And then as fast as that happened, those magic candles turned back on and I was in fear. But when that happened, I had a shift in consciousness where I started to be more that of that awareness. And then my whole life was changed from that point on.
What what was the catalyst for that? Was that like were psychedelics used, or was it kind of like an experience that you went through that kind of like cracked you open and then you went to that state?
Yeah, well, Carl Jung said it best. There's no coming to consciousness without pain. And I was in so much pain, I woke up and I had a friend who passed away was with me that night. I blacked out. I was drunk. And then he told me I went into a room and it sounded like I was fighting with demons. So he was so scared he left me alone. And yeah, told me later when he was in prison. He was telling me this story. He called me and yeah, it was just crazy because I was a whole different person from that point on. So
Wow.
it was just pain. It was so much pain. I woke. I had like a mystical experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's incredible. There's definitely been times in my life too. My awakening was kicked off with I was just at such a deep low. And I felt called to do I had done research on psychedelics forever, had read about ayahuasca, but I came from a background where it was like Satan. That's satanic, right? Anything you don't understand, it's Satan, it's evil.
Mm.
And I had built this, I had made millions of dollars in my 20s. Everything was working, started this company. A lot of really unfortunate things happened that caused me to like lose it all outside of like things that I was doing, right? And it just like completely sent me to the lowest of the low where so much of my identity was tied to how much I made, being a provider, all of these egoic things. And it truly took me to the point where it's like I wanted to like unsubscribe from life, right? I was just like, I failed. I failed my children. I failed my wife. I failed everyone. Jesus is unhappy with me. Like I'm being punished because I'm a terrible person. And because you can always like I grew up with so much self-hatred. And it's really, really interesting because I think what I'm trying to help people to do with my content is on the night that Siddhartha, right, became the Buddha when he's sitting under the tree. First Mara sends his daughters to dance in front of him and he's unmoved. Then Mara sends the storms and the armies and things to scare him. And the final thing that Mara does is like, what right do you have? Like, who can witness? Like, who are you to claim this, right? And, what I'm really trying to help people to realize is, sometimes we create these, we'll put these teachers on pedestals and we subconsciously create separation because you witness someone else's divinity and you're like, they're so amazing. And what you're doing is you're actually collapsing yourself because the only thing that you're witnessing is yourself, which is
Yeah.
so cool, right? But you're collapsing yourself. And I came to the world like I'm trying to help people to just truly tap into, and I see it with you, man. Like, it's really cool because the more I've tapped into this, some of my spiritual gifts are like channeling. Most of the things I talk about, I haven't like read about them. I'm not like well studied in this. It's just like I can create the stillness. I can ask a
Mhm.
question and things come through. And there's like a purity of the desire to learn. I don't care about people thinking I'm a great teacher. I don't care about people being like, wow, he knows so much. I just want we're living in heaven, right? And I'm like, this world can be such a better place. It's like, come on, guys, let's wake up and let's build something better because, I'm like, it is going to be amazing. Um, and, I came with this, I really did come with this heart that just cares so deeply. And what's interesting is it was also paired with a lot of self-hatred. Like I hated myself growing up, I had there's always been this kind of like magnetism, in the church that I grew up in, it's very like patriarchal and hierarchical. I was always put into leadership positions at schools, and any teams that I played on, right? It's always the popular dude, the captain of the team, all these things. And I hated myself for it. Like I hated any form of hierarchy. And like it just turned out to be the self-hatred. And so when everything collapsed for me, all that self-hatred came out where it's like, yeah, you deserve this. It's like, who are you? Like you're the worst. And so I turned to psychedelics just because I heard that, ayahuasca can help with depression. And basically that just completely cracked me open where I was just like, wow, everything I thought I knew, I don't know. And, and ayahuasca was essentially like, hey, like, you've been performing a character this whole time and it's like and that's not you and it's time for you to be who you actually came to be, and it was a very sacred and cool experience. Now I will say to everyone out there, psychedelics are a very neutral tool and there's a lot of energies out there that will mess with you, and so if you feel called to it, you don't need to be afraid, but make sure that you're working with like shamans and people who are rooted in knowledge, who know what they're talking about, because I think a lot of times in Western culture, we're just kind of like, we're so programmed for immediate gratification or, going balls to the wall. I want enlightenment. And so I'm going to take the highest dose of mushrooms I possibly can. And that is like a very quick way to like really, really do some long lasting like damage to yourself, right? Because there's a lot of entities and energies out there that will fuck with you. And so,
Yeah.
I don't like, I had a great experience with ayahuasca. It was very good, but I've also seen people who have had experiences that haven't been so great. And so it isn't, one size fits all band-aid. Definitely listen to your own intuition. But it's really interesting because, yeah, what you were saying about the pain, there's been many times where, I've gone through experiences where they were very painful and they took me to deep lows. But then what they do is they crack you open and then you reach this different state where it's just like, wow, okay, that was the purpose of that thing. And it's like, I can see how it was serving me. You can kind of like detach from the pain and the suffering. And then, a more enlightened perspective, a more expansive perspective will come in and broaden. And so, it's really interesting because I think many people, just as we're talking, like the message that keeps coming into my head is just the truth that you're speaking. Oh, and what I did want to say is I recognize the purity. Like I see that same purity within you. Like when I feel into your energy, it's like there's a pureness to that signal and it's not ego. This isn't being like, wow, we're so much better, right? It's simply understanding. It's not pride for an oak tree to be an oak tree. There's a lot of oak trees out there that are pretending to be bushes under the guise of humility, and that's not humility. That's illusion. That's, mental illness. It's like an oak tree is an oak tree. It is okay to recognize the purity of one signal. Now, if you think it makes you better than someone else, that's when it starts going into ego. But if you recognize it, this is where you tap into your gifts. And like the thing that kept coming into my head as you were talking about the truth with pain being a catalyst is I'm like, damn, I need to make a video about this. This is shout out to you. But I'm like, the issue is in modern society, we're so focused on escapism that we want to escape our pain. We want to numb our pain, right? And this is why we turn to everything. And I mean, it can be drugs and alcohol. It can be sex. It can be binge watching television on Netflix. It can be, doom scrolling on social media. anything right because it's like we feel discomfort, we feel pain. But the issue is, it's like that pain, that discomfort, it's all a signal to you. It's all trying to course correct. It's trying to bring you into alignment. And when you numb, you're not escaping it. You're just like getting rid of the signal, but you're still off course. So it's always going to come back, right? And that's what people need to learn is it's just like, no, be in that pain, be in that discomfort because it's going to be a catalyst. It's trying to usher you into something more expansive. But if we keep numbing it, then it can't happen, right? We're putting off the expansion that's trying to come in. And that's, it's just like, wow, that's one of the things, it's just like, everybody wants expansion, but nobody wants to go through the pain to, or the discomfort. It doesn't always have to be pain. Sometimes it's just being uncomfortable, right? Sitting in silence and just being like, this is really hard.
Mm.
And so, wow, that's a really cool, interesting thought.
No, I love that because I was trying to escape. I was trying to forget and numb myself through alcohol, right? And other behaviors. But once that chronic use of alcohol, those receptors become desensitized, so they're not doing the magic anymore. They're not working.
Exactly.
So I was left with pain.
Yeah.
My emotions became stronger than the effects produced by alcohol, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't doing the magic anymore. And then I was stuck with the pain and yeah, I was just tired. I was just done. But the crazy part is like one of my favorite scriptures is blessed are the pure in heart,
Hmm.
for they shall see God.
Yep.
And a lot of the layers within myself, within the mask, started to dissolve. And I
Hmm.
woke up without those layers, and I started to have a cleaner filter. I share this all the time, but I'm gonna share it with you. Recently, about 3 months ago or so, I was walking the lake by my house, Estrella Mountain, and there was a father and his little 3-year-old or 4-year-old daughter, and they're looking at the lake, at the ducks and the birds and stuff. And I'm walking the path, right. You had to turn around to see me. So the little girl turns around and she's just at all a pure state of awareness, watching life in action, just a pure reflection, seeing God in action, right? But then the father turned around and he had, I seen this clearly where he was looking through the lens of his filters, through his life experiences. I'm a father, which is normal, right? Blah, 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 all the conditioning. You may even judgments, look at this guy, how he look, I don't know, but he's just looking at a different reality, whole different reality from this little girl. So to
Wow.
enter the kingdom of heaven is to be like a
Yeah.
little child. It came to life in me. I was like, whoa, who experiences this walking their dog? Like, whoa, like, cause I seen it clear, both realities, the way they seen everything.
Exactly,
It was,
man.
yeah.
It's so beautiful. And I really think that that's also why, that scripture that I mentioned is so profound, where it's like, if you look at what is in your sight with awareness, everything will become, manifest to you is because, how many of us are just sleepwalking through life, right? Where it's just like getting to that next thing, we're in our thoughts, either in the past or the future, these energies that are trying to tie us down, to pull us down. And it's just like, when you're truly like, I think back to the times and the moments where it's like, I can fully be present. Um, and it's just like all you see is the divinity, and I think, it's really, really interesting because it's just like, yeah, the pure in heart, they see God. Um, One thing I've been, trying to teach and reach people with recently is, we know about like duality, right? Before anything was, it was. What is it? The great mystery, right? It's like it is
Yeah.
so far beyond our comprehension. It's everything and nothing. It's completely unified, because disconnection doesn't exist. It's just like it's it. There is anyone that could, I think Taoism is like my favorite descriptor, where it is the Tao, and they're just like the Tao that can be explained is not the Tao. The Tao that can be understood is not the Tao. And it's like, yeah, 100%. That is the way to explain it. Um, and, from that came this illusion of separation, right? Duality, push, pull, masculine, feminine, light, shadow, all these different things. But it's an illusion because it's just the one being manifest. And, it manifests in so many different ways, but it's all the one unified field. If we need to classify it into like a term that we can conceptualize, it's the one unified field. It's everything is the same, but it's manifesting is different, right? And I think that's why when it's like when you walk with awareness, you see God because you're just like, there's not a single place that you can look where you're not witnessing divinity. Like there's not a single place that you can look where you're not witnessing divinity being made manifest, right? And it's like when you understand that magic, this is why, we're being called back into these, indigenous wisdoms, right? The prophecy of the seventh generation, and these people who live with the land, who live with creation, the cycles of creation. It's because they recognize it's all the one. It's all divine. And there's so much that we can learn about it because when we realize it's like, okay, the elementals are God being manifest. These animals are God being manifest, the trees, the brushes, the cycles of nature, it's all God. And then it's like, what is this showing me? What is this teaching me? What is it revealing to me about, our nature? And it's really interesting because I think a lot of people hear the whole purity in heart. And I think a lot of people have distorted understanding of what pureness means in the same way that people think that like perfection is a thing, right? Like people think that perfection is like a state to achieve, right? Jesus was perfect. Buddha became perfect, right? And it's just like, no, what is perfect? It's like the universe is infinitely expanding. Like it is constantly, right now, we're talking about the universe and it's already expanded past where it was. And it's like the same goes for us. There's always more to experience. There's more to understand. It never ends. There is no end. And, it's interesting because if you truly understand duality, if you truly understand that everything, all separation is just the one, being manifest is different, you realize that every spiritual truth requires embracing paradox, right? Because it's a paradox to say everything is different, but it's all the same, right? We're all the one, but it's all different. And it's interesting because you'll see these paradoxes everywhere. Like one of the paradoxes is anybody that believes they're enlightened is energetically closing themselves off because it's like they're holding themselves in collapse. They won't let anything else come in to expand them because they believe they're enlightened. They believe that they've reached it. They know everything. But if you embody the energy of everything is my teacher, everything is showing me something, everything is inviting me into expansion, you're holding an energy of enlightenment because you're open. Things can come in, right? There's like a willingness. And so it's a paradox because it's like if you don't believe you're enlightened, it's like you're actually holding the correct energy for enlightenment to happen. Enlightenment is a process. There's always more. But if you hold the energy of being enlightened, you've just cut yourself off, right? And you're like suppressing yourself. I think another really cool spiritual paradox that would benefit a lot of people right now is, these paradoxes are all true and people will get caught up in one side of the paradox. And if you're only on one side, it's going to create imbalance and it's going to put you in a loop. And I think the cool thing with holding two paradoxical energies is the only place for you to exist when holding two opposing forces is in the middle. It naturally creates a balanced state. Like you have to be balanced to hold both. You have to, be centered. And I think one of those paradoxical truths is people get caught up in this idea of we are all God, as I was just describing, right? It is all divinity made manifest. Well, if you only hold that one side, you can get trapped in the ego where it's like, I'm God. I can do whatever I want. I am all powerful. The other side of the paradox is I'm less than the dust of the earth. There is nothing special about me, right? Like, it's like, who am I in this vast creation of all these intelligences and energies? But if you only get caught up on that side, it's also very self-deprecating and you're not witnessing the power and the ability that you have to co-create within this creation. But if you hold both of those paradoxical energies, it is going to create this balanced state, right? Where you can move knowing the divinity that exists within you while also recognizing the divinity in everything else. So it's like you are special, but you're not special. People get caught up in the craziness of the world right now. And it's like, you have to hold the paradox of none of this is real, so I don't give a fuck. Because it's just like, whatever, it's not real. Like, it's just like, we talk about, are we going to destroy the world? Is everything going to end? And it's like, unfortunately, it can't end because consciousness will continue to exist. Maybe this plane ends, but it's like, we can't die. You know, it's just, it goes on forever. We're living in this illusion of time. So that's one side of the paradox. The other side is this is very real. Pain is very real. Suffering is very real. These lives are real, right? And if you hold both of those paradoxical energies, it literally creates what Jesus says, right? Where it's be in the world, not of the world.
Mm.
I call it, it's the like, being able to move as if you give a fuck without giving a fuck, right? It's kind
Yeah.
of like you're in the energy, not consumed by it. And so it's cool because you'll see these paradoxes everywhere. And I believe I believe you're a paradox, it's so funny because if you go to the mainstream, when people talk about prophets or holy men or people who are teaching truth, right? What is the picture that they're going to think of? I guarantee you it's not the streets. And it's like, how many prophets come from the streets? So many, right? Because you guys are accustomed to that pain. It's like you witness the world as it is. You see who sees more clearly. I mean, people are starting to wake up to like the systems of oppression that we live in. But it's like, people of color have been like, we've been knowing this forever, guys. It's like, we've been trying to tell you this, but y'all been asleep because you're like, well, it's an oppressive system, but it's serving me. So like, why should I care? Right. And now people are starting to see where it's like, wait a second, the system doesn't care about me either. It only cares about itself. And it's like, wow. And so, it's so interesting to see everything as it's happening right now. But I think the biggest paradox that people need to embrace, and I would love to kind of like get your thoughts on it. And sorry, I'm like spilling so much. Sometimes it's
No,
like
I
things
love
just
it.
come
I
through and
love
I'm
it.
like tangent, 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 tangent. It's my ADHD brain. But I think one of the paradoxes is people will talk about manifestation. I think there's a lot of distortion around manifestation. I think people believe it's like this skill that you learn or you like master, your conscious thought. And I think that is a form of manifestation. It totally is. It just requires effort. And the moment that you stop, it breaks that creation loop, if you will. I think the higher form of creation is, again, going back to that scripture in the Gospel of Thomas. It's realizing that any energy you embody will be manifest. And so simply, if you want to create change, you just need to truly embody it. And you can't fake energy. You can't positive think yourself to energy. That's where it's like you have to do the work. You have to see, where do I collapse myself? How do I expand past this? So I believe that's a higher form of creation, is just simply embodying the energy and realizing that everything is meant for you will come to you. But people talk about with manifesting, right? They talk about that you need to experience what you want. You need to act as if it's real. You need to feel it in your body, which
Mm.
again, I would just argue is it's embodying the energy so that it creates it. But the same goes with the world, right? So if you with your personal manifestations need to act as if you already have it, the same goes with this world. If we want peace in this plane, if we want systems that serve every living thing, right? We need to act and move as if we already have it. Like that's, it's the macro is the micro. We need to recognize that this plane is perfectly imperfect right now. All of the chaos that is going on is serving our expansion. But
Mm.
that doesn't mean we bypass it and just say, well, it's the way that it's supposed to be. And it's like, no, people need to start moving. Everybody came with medicine. Everybody came with something to serve the collective. We need to get rid of these masks and we need to start stepping into the roles that we came here to be, right? And it's the paradox of being ushers in the becoming. And so if we can just be who you're supposed to be right now, if there's something that comes into your soul that says like, hey, you're supposed to, some inspiration comes in. Here's what you can do to ignite people or whatever. It's like, act on it, act on it. Right. And it's like, we just be in this moment. This is what's coming in. Let me just act. I'm completely released from results. I don't have any expectations on what's going to happen, what it's going to look like, what it's going to create. I just know this is coming in right now. I'm going to move on it. And I always tell people it's a self-sorting puzzle. It's like the more people start resonating authentically, the more they start expressing these things, it's like reality is going to shift and it's going to sort itself into a more coherent state where a lot of these illusions are going to come falling down. But it's like, if people keep grasping and holding to these illusions, I'm like, how much crazier does our system need to get before people are going to be like, okay, maybe it's broken. Maybe it is broken. Like the amount of people that are still like, it's the Democrats or it's the Republicans. It's like, guys, it's both of them. It's both of them.
Yeah.
It's the system. And unfortunately for us, it's like the system hasn't degraded. It's the system is working exactly the way it was designed to. It's always been this way. You look at how it treated Native Americans. You know, I look at the Lakota tribe and it was like 60 plus treaties were signed. The Lakota didn't break a single one. And it's like the US government broke every single treaty. And we somehow think that the government's going to keep promises to its people. And it's like, it's never kept promises, right? And so like, it's just like, you know, you see the spots of the leopard. It's a leopard. It's a leopard. It's always been a leopard.
You know, which brings me into mind, you know, you posted something a while back where you talked about history, and you said something like history is about more than one perspective. And I recently I put out an episode about the slave ship Jesus. There was a slave ship called Jesus, slave ship called God's Grace, and a slave ship called John the Baptist.
Wow.
And people got pissed off. I lost a lot of subscribers, which is fine. But I got hate emails from a few people.
Wow.
I've had people make comments, liar, liar. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa. And it's just like, why is it wrong to get different perspectives? We're so caught up in one narrative.
And why do people identify so much with narratives, right? Like
Yeah.
they act as if that was them, right? And it means something about them. And like that's the issue is you know, I think of I mean, it's like a Buddhist and a Taoist and a Jain proverb. I think everyone lays claim to this proverb, but it's the five blind man and the elephant, right? And it's like one touches the trunk, one touches, you know, the leg, one touches the tusk, and they're all arguing, right? Where it's like it's a spear, it's a column, it's a snake. And you know, it's so funny because it's like we identify with our perspective so much, which is like if you just feel how it feels in your body when it's like this perspective is right. It's like, do you feel open to more or do you feel closed off? And it's like, of course it's closed off because you're not willing to see anything else. And it's like, quit identifying with these stories. Like we need to look at history. Like we need to sit down as a people and be like, let's pull in all of the perspectives because we need to figure out what the fuck is wrong with us. Like, why do we keep doing this? Why do we bypass humanity for more power, for more money, for more control? It's like, for what? For what, you know? But it's so tough because it's like, I think it's kind of that Plato's allegory of the cave, where it's like when you escape out of the cave and you see things as they are, and you're just like, wow, I get it. Now let me go liberate my brothers and sisters. You know, let me go tell them that there's more to this. And as soon as you go down, they're like, we're going to kill you. You're wrong. Like, how dare you question my perspective? And it's just, it's so fast. There's just safety, right? It's a pseudo safety. People think they're safe in thinking the way that they do, in never changing their perspective and having the right historical context. It's the same reason, to be honest, why white people get so triggered when we talk about a white savior complex. And they're just like, what are you talking about? And it's like, guys, let's look at history and give me a single perspective where the white settlers did not come into the land and immediately think that they were more evolved, smarter, more powerful, stronger, God's chosen people, you know, taking everything. And it's like, me as a white person, I can recognize that and I can say, okay, I'm not inherently bad. I don't hate the color of my skin, but I can see, yeah, there's a superiority complex that my ancestors had. And I can also look at myself and then be like, where do I think I'm superior? Where do I hold on to this energy? Where can I release this and come back, right? Because it's like we all carry the energy from our ancestors, light and shadow. We have their gifts and we have, you know, some of the energies that they didn't want to deal with. But it's so funny because it's like anytime I comment on anything on social media, and to be fair, I think our political system does such a good job with the propaganda where they have just force-fed white people where it's like anybody that questions you, it's like they just want you to, they hate you because of your skin and they're the racists, because it's like you're not doing anything wrong. You're a good person, right? And it's like I have heard this so many times where people will call out black, brown, Asian people for being like, you're racist because you're doing this. And it's like, no, guys, they're trying to share their experience. And it's like, if we could just put our pitchforks down for a moment and just be like, hey, how has the system hurt you? Because it's like, they're not trying to attack you. They're just simply trying to say, this system is messed up. And like, it is. It always has been. It always has been. They've always used race as a divide, right? It's like they've always done things to push a racial divide or a divide with your neighbors so that we don't focus on the real divide that exists, which is a class divide. And it's like, it's a very small group at the top that is causing these issues. And they have done a really good job of making us all think it's one another. Like the fact that people the fact that people can look at what is going on in the modern world right now and they think it's these quote unquote illegals, which is like the most disrespectful freaking word, to come onto a land that
Human
is
being.
stolen and then be like, hey, it's illegal. It's just like the fact that people can't see the hypocrisy is insane. But it's like, even more than that, the fact that that lie still works, that it's, hey, they're the problems. They're the ones that are stealing your jobs. And then people are like, yep, this is what I'm going to spend my time and attention is fighting over whether this is okay. When we see videos of children being ripped out of mothers' hands, fathers pleading to just be with their families and don't do this. And people can look at that and be like, they should have come here legally. It's just like, we're so detached from our human emotion.
Mm.
It's so sad, but it's like that detachment to me is just the signal of like, well, it shows you that there's pain that people don't want to feel. And it's just like, so everyone's going through something where it's like they refuse to feel that pain. They refuse to be cracked open, which is why we can use the bypass of they should have come here legally. It's their problem, whatever. And it's like, no, you need to tap into being a human again. And you need to sit with the discomfort of seeing what's happening because it's not okay. It is not okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it was to see so many people just leave or send some hate emails or make some comments, negative comments. It was like, wow, no one wants to hear just a whole different perspective.
Which oh my gosh, no one wants to hear the perspective. And number two, I think Jesus is like one of the best teachers. I think he is, oh my gosh, like that dude was so plugged in. I think it is incredibly ironic that they built the very system around him that he was fighting against. But even more so, like the things that were done at the hands of the churches. Right. And so I'm like, what you were talking about, I want to go listen to that podcast. Like, I'm like, that right there is honestly a manifestation of paradox, where it's like, you got the Jesus ship, you got the John the Baptist ship, right? You have these things, slave ships. And it's like that there is nothing more ironic than naming these ships after these people that they, hold as holy, the church, right? This is like God's work. And then they have these like slave ships. And I think the more that people will look into our history of what's happened, they will see just how many evils have been done in the name of God. These missions that were done, the Native American boarding schools
Yeah.
that were run by priests and ministers. And you look at the horrors that happen. And it's just like, there's so many good and beautiful things that truly come from religion. And like, but the issue is most people think it's either has to be all good or all bad. And people will always, and it's like, it's not all good or all bad. It's a spectrum. There are amazing people that come from these religious institutions. There are also terrible parasites who use God as a bypass to do whatever they want to inflict suffering, pain, take advantage of other souls, right? In the name of God. And, we just somehow people need to break out of this black and white thinking. And so if you figure it out, let me know, because so many times it just feels like, again, Plato's allegory of the cave, where it's like, I feel like I'm putting this out as simply as possible. But it's just funny because, it's like I'll comment about how broken the political system is. And it'll be filled with people commenting for me where they're just like, you just hate yourself because you're white. You've been programmed to hate your white skin. And it's like, no, it's just, I'm like, guys, the system fucking sucks. I'm like, if you look at your life, truly look at it, you're slaving away for pennies on the dollar. Are you really that happy? Or can you look at this and just be like, you know what? I don't really like this. There could be something better. I'm like, why are we attaching ourselves to this? I'm like, I cannot believe the government has done such a good job of just like creating this loyalty. I'm like, who is loyal to politicians? I'm like, why are people like defending these politicians to the death as if they're like a loved one? It's like, oh my gosh, if there's anything to be critical of, always, it is the government. Every single day, we should be looking at our government, being super critical, being like, how does it need to be better? Where is it broken? And I think that's probably the biggest piece of propaganda that is working so successfully is, we've been told from birth in our school systems, this is the best government ever created. This is like we do it right. Everyone else is wrong. Like we are this democracy that kills it, right? And so we all kind of grow up with this like pride where it's like, yeah, we're the best. And I'm like, no, we need to look at this as if it's like, whoa, this is so broken. This is so broken. It doesn't mean that we're bad, but like, look at the issues we're causing around the world. Look at how our politicians only care about themselves. What do we do to fix it? Can you imagine if Apple, after the first iPhone, they were just like, it's the best phone ever created. We're done. We did it. And they never evolved. And it's just like, yeah, eventually that iPhone, people are going to be like, this sucks. And I'm like, the same thing goes with our political systems. It was amazing. The way that they set the system up to have representatives in Congress and everything, incredible. We have the technology now where we can get everybody's opinions. We have the technology where it's like, why do we need a representative? Why can't we have everybody that is in a location express an opinion on something, right? The technology can collect those opinions. They can they can aggregate the information. What do people need? What do we care about? What's working? What isn't working, right? We can pull the human that is so easily manipulated by power and money and greed and all these different things and implement neutral systems, right? But then we'll run into the issue in the future. What will happen is we'll have like 1,000 years of abundance. It's going to be super good. And then people are going to start manipulating the system, right? And it's just the cycle repeats. And so, it's so interesting, man. But I am so sorry for rambling so much with you.
No, I love it. And I think a genuine awakening is you end up in the middle.
Exactly.
So I can't comprehend how some of these spiritual teachers are justifying some of the stuff that's going on. Like we got to be the change.
It's bypassing. I think any spiritual teacher that like I see people talking about, well, you can't contribute to the energy. You need to look at it from a higher plane. Anytime people talk about hierarchies, this is higher, this is lower. I'm like, it's an illusion, guys. Like, it's like everything is necessary for creation. We're not in an ascension. We're in an expansion. Expansion is in all directions, including inwards. I think I think a lot of people get caught up in like the crown chakra and understanding like the mysteries of the universe. And I think what we're being called into right now is an expansion of the heart chakra. It's in the middle. I look at, people talk about the tree of life or the tree of knowledge. And it's just like, well, what is a tree? It is rooted in the ground. It is deeply rooted in the ground, and its branches are reaching up into the sky. And it's like, we are to be the trunk, right? It's like that middle, that bridge between the two. This is why it's also Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, all of these teachers. they're not talking about enlightenment, is you need to send your mind to the future. You need to send your mind to the farthest state in the future and tap into that potential. It's like, no, you come into the present. You come into the now. What is the now? It is the middle. It is the bridge of the past and the future, right? And so everything, every truth, I believe, is in the center. Because I believe what I truly believe is, I believe the one, or everything from which this all manifests. I believe it's all coming out of it. It's coming out of that center. It's coming through us. It's not outside of us and we tap into it. It's not behind us and we tap into it. It's in that middle. And so I think all truth comes down to being in the middle.
That. You talk about epigenetics. How can we learn with understanding epigenetics and how it all works?
Yeah, I think obviously there's like, I think social media is such a cool tool. I think, the fact that you can just like hop on your phone and search epigenetics on like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and see people who are much smarter than I am making videos explaining it, right? And you can be like, wow. The key is to, make sure, one really cool practice that I recently learned about, it was from, I think it was like a Don Juan or some other, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like a lineage of like shaman. Um, I can't remember what the lineage was, but they were just saying that one thing that they recommend before you ever consume anything on a screen, whether it's your phone, whether it's your TV, computer, is just to stare at a candle just for like 2 minutes and kind of like intentionally just purify your sight and purify everything that you're about to take in, because you're going to take in a lot of information. And I think it allows you to be intentional and tap into your discernment, because there's a lot of false information out there, but there's also a lot of really good information. But I think, yeah, just like really, doing some research. But I think more than that with epigenetics is, it's like, okay, it's cool to learn, about these studies where it's like Holocaust victims, right? Great grandchildren of Holocaust survivors carried with them traumas that they inherited, right? And that's been studied. It's been documented, right? Scientists can prove it. And so we know it's real. Um, we know that we carry these energies with us. But I think more than that knowledge, I think that's cool. But I think it's, sitting down and being like, okay, if this is real, and this is what Christine always talks about, right? It's that remember your roots, reconnecting with your roots. It's like your ancestors carried what you now carry, the well and wise ones, right? They've been there. And so I think just creating that stillness, and, for me, it was really kind of like, anytime I can meditate, create stillness, I'm like an active meditator, if you can't tell with how I talk. I don't create silence. What I actually like a methodology that's called like Wu Wei Golden Thread. And it's like you pull, right? You're just pulling the thread on everything. And so I'm like, okay, this triggered me today. Why did this trigger me? What is the source of that trigger? Have I always been triggered with this, or is this something I inherited? What's the earliest moment that I can identify this trigger, right? And so for me, it's like, I like to do those things because I can identify like, oh, what energy is mine and what energy is, do I identify as mine, but it's not me, right? And then I can like work to kind of like acknowledge it as a teacher, call it back in, respect it, but then also like sever that connection and just being like, all right, I'm not carrying that energy anymore. I don't want to like maintain it. And so I just think, I think a lot of people I don't want to call it a trap. I think there's like a comfort in seeking knowledge. And I think a lot of times it's like, there's always another book to read. There's always more you can learn. There's always it's like, you can read Buddha's perspective, you can read Jesus' perspective, you can read Krishna's perspective, you can read modern day, prophets and teachers, all these people, their perspectives. And it's amazing. It's so beautiful. But the key is, it's like, if you're not taking those steps yourself, you're still stuck in an illusion, because it's like you're getting this illusion of progress. And I think this is why there's so many people who can talk about expressing authentically, but still who are afraid to speak out about some of the things that are happening. You have people who talk about how it's like, you just need to be you and do not care consequences. But then they're afraid to post certain things because it's just like, well, what if people don't like it? What if I lose followers? What if this hurts my business, right? And so it's just like, I think the key is, it's like, it's one thing to understand the talk, but you got to walk the walk. And We all, everybody listening to this, none of us are walking the walk perfectly. And the other side of the paradox is you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You're exactly where you're
Love
supposed to
that.
be. You're not behind. You're not behind. You're not doing something wrong. Nobody's ahead of you. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. And so the key is to maintain this kind of idea of where am I not walking the walk? Why am I not walking the walk? And the why has always been the most powerful thing for me. Like in the past, there was a lot of things I was afraid to post about. And so I would woo way golden thread that shit, right? It's like, why am I afraid to post this? And it's like, well, I'm afraid people won't like it. And it's like, well, why do I care what people like? And it's like, oh my gosh, I attach my self-worth to external validation. Why do I attach that self-worth to external validation? And it's like, well, I feel safe when people like me, but when people dislike me, I feel like something's wrong. And it's like, well, is something wrong if people dislike me? And it's like, no. I know that this is truth and I feel like I need to express it, so I need to express it. And it's like truth change if people validate it or invalidate it. And it's like, no, truth is truth. And it's like, so why won't I express truth? And it's like, well, I'm afraid. And it's like, so am I going to keep living in fear or am I going to expand past it and trust that it's going to reach the people that it's meant to? And it's also the other side of this is you are meant to trigger people when you're living authentically. It doesn't mean that you're going to be an asshole. It doesn't mean you're a dick where it's just, like, fuck you. But it does mean that, like, if you feel like you're supposed to do something and say something and you're doing it from a perspective of love and you're doing it from a perspective of, like, I want to expand people's perspectives. I want to shine a light on illusion. You are holding up a karmic mirror. And it's, you don't get to choose whether people look at that mirror. And it's like, but if you distort yourself in any way, you're holding up a funhouse mirror. They're getting a distorted reflection, right? You're not doing them a service. But when you radiate authentically, when you express authentically, when you make the posts, regardless of how people are going to feel about them, it is going to trigger people. And that's a gift. That really is a gift because you're not doing it out of hate. You're not doing it where it's like, I'm better than you. You're simply trying to shine a light on illusion. Now, they get to choose whether they're going to look at that trigger. They get to choose whether they're going to look at that reflection. And I pray that everybody does. I pray that everybody does because what they're going to witness with that reflection is that the trigger isn't them, that they're clinging to a piece, a mask that isn't them. And they don't need to cling to it, Like, yes, let's look at what our ancestors have done. None of our ancestors were perfect, okay? Nobody's ancestors were perfect. There's not a single system that was perfect. Because if the system was perfect, we wouldn't be where we are right now. But I think we can look at these systems and we can also see, okay, well, there were certain groups who really, really raced to the bottom of depravity, who really raced and got rid of their humanity quickly to gain land, to gain power, to gain money. My ancestors are included with that, okay? I can honor them. I can thank them for their lives because it's like they brought me to where I am now. I know that I have many, many good ancestors who also fought on the side of equality, fighting for everyone, and those I identify with. But it's like, I'm not going to overly identify with these ancestors. Like, fuck them. Fuck them. It's like, gosh dang it. All of them created so many problems that now we have to deal with, And so I'm like, let's focus on the present right now. Who cares who did what back then? Where's the system broken? How do we create a system that values all life, that values Mother Earth? We are living on a magical rock that gives us everything we need. If we just live with her, if we nurture her and take care of her, she will give things to us that nurture us and take care of us. And we're actively killing her so that we can get more money? Like, what are we doing? It's so dumb. And so I do think there's also some times where it's like, we can get caught up in the past and it's like, yes, we need to we need to transmute our shadows. We need to heal from these things. We need to walk the path that you've walked, that I've walked, that Christina's walked, right? But I also think there's a certain period where you realize where you're like, I need to heal from this idea that I need to heal. It's like, I need to awaken from my awakening. Like, what are we doing? And I think that's what we're seeing right now with a lot of the people on the spiritual path is they've been performing awakening. And I think some are starting to awaken from that awakening where it's like, holy shit, this world is broken and we need to do things to fix it while holding the other side of the paradox of it's exactly where it's supposed to be. So do everything you can and just release the results. Like it's all good. You know, you don't need to carry the weight. Like hold paradox, hold paradox. It'll create balance.
I love it. I would love to have you back. You were helping remind me about, I'm going to paraphrase Lao Tzu. If you always worried what other people think of you, you always be their prisoner. And I got to remember that at times, you
Wow.
know? Um,
We all do.
and yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to ask you one quick, brief question before I
Yeah.
end this.
Yeah. Yeah. I will try my best to give
Authenticity,
a brief answer. Yeah.
authenticity or love? What's higher?
Love. I think, um, yeah, it's so funny. Oh my, I did a post about this because, I published a document on my page, about how love unlocks your effortless expansion. And, you know, I think sometimes people think that like Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, um, unity consciousness, like all these things are something to obtain. And it's like, no, it's something to embody. And it's like love unlocks all of it. If you are going throughout every situation in your life saying, how can I feel more love? How can I express more love? How can I embody more love? You will embody Christ consciousness, right? And it's everything in this life. This is not a destination. This is all about having tools and practices so that when you recognize you're out of alignment, you can bring yourself back into alignment. And it's direct, redirect, right? It is a continual thing. It is impossible to always stay in alignment, right? It's like anybody that thinks that that's possible, I'm like, you've been sold a story, unfortunately, because the nature of this reality is we will dip our toes into illusion and then we come back, right? The illusion, with self-expression, caring about what people think, that's illusion. We can recognize it and we can redirect back to where it's like, what is the most loving thing that you can do for yourself? Never suppress your voice in any way because it's you. And, you know, I think, a meditation that I have on my page that anybody listening to this, it was something that I spontaneously went through that was very expansive. It's where I witnessed myself in all of my ages from a state of non-judgment. I separated from this actor I'm playing as Taylor Perkins, this persona, and I was my divine intelligence consciousness. And what I witnessed in myself was all of my forms and that it is my most perfect teacher. All of his thoughts, his desires, his expression is divine. And I am the one that gets to choose whether I shine that light on him or I don't. I, as the divine consciousness, will live forever. Taylor has one life, one life. And the beauty that he is, the divinity that he is, only I get to witness it. And then I get to choose if I express it, right? And it's an act of self-love to never collapse. It is an act of self-love to also recognize that Taylor, I do not expect perfection from him ever. Like, what is perfect? You know, I recognize that he has light and shadow, but I remind him all the time of how beautiful he is, how perfect he is where he's at, that I'm so grateful for his life, right? For these experiences that I'm having. I hate talking in third person because it sounds so lame, but to understand this meditation, you kind of have to. And so I had a spontaneous experience with that, which was very expansive. I made my own guided meditation for anybody. You can go to my page. They're linked. And it kind of like walks you through that. It brings you down into like because a lot of the blocks that people have, a lot of the conditionings, the programmings, they exist within the subconscious. And so you really got to, you know, rewire and reprogram yourself. But ultimately, again, you asked for a brief answer and I'm like, no, I'm going to give you the whole runaround. I think love is the energy that holds space for everything. I think love is the energy from which paradox, duality came. Love is the energy that can allow light and shadow to both exist, high vibration and low vibration, because all is necessary for creation. Love is not a transactional thing that we give each other where it's like, I love you. Love is so much bigger than that. Love is the sun that radiates on the earth, whether there's good people, bad people, short people, tall people, fat people, hungry people, you know, whatever. It's like it is radiating to everyone and everything without any return, without any expectation of return. And so I think authenticity is an expression of love. And so anyone that's like, authenticity is the highest thing, it's like, well, where do you think authenticity comes from? Bitches, it's love. Yeah.
I love that, man. I'd
Yeah.
love to have you back on.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll do it for sure, man.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I appreciate, amazing. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And seriously, brother, like you have such an amazing energy. There is such a purity to like your signal, and you can tell that you are very heart-centered. Like there's a reason why you went through everything you did. There's a reason why you're incarnated as the person that you are, but you brought a lot of that excellence, that purity, that wisdom. You brought it with you. And so thank you for doing what you're doing, sharing your medicine with people and radiating because yeah, man, it has such profound effects on this plane. And I just want you to know, like, I feel it so strongly with you. And so
Appreciate it.
thank you, man. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna end it with a Wayne Dyer quote, and he says, "When you squeeze an orange juice comes out because that's what's inside. When you are squeezed, what comes out is what is inside you." Wayne
Wow.
Dyer. Thanks for coming on.
Wow. I love that. So good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on the day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.